Hey everyone, welcome to May 29th PPT coaching call. We're going to get on to it. We're going to take a look at the week review. We're going to take a look at this chart where we are and whether in the new information that we just got on this breakdown and see where we're at. Now, we knew, right, going into this area, right, that because we were so extended in leg count up, right, that the market could be prone to a steeper pullback, right? We are one leg, two leg, three count, four leg counts up. We can expect sideways, but possibly even a steeper sideways because of the fourth leg count independently, but also in context of the fact that we're at this major resistance zone, which, yes, we broke to all-time new highs. But unfortunately, on this retest here, when price was trying to make a higher high, I believe this was going to Monday, right? You could see we failed, right? So we broke below back into this, right? So now this has potentially to switch to the larger time frame bias, which has been bullish up until this last week, where I designated it as neutral, meaning I'm uncertain as to who's in control because we're so extended into this potential bearish turning point that we have to acknowledge. Now, my prediction based on a higher time frame chart that I will show you and based on a few other higher time frame factors that I will go over now, I believe this will not rotate down and form a larger bounce and go back and test maybe 80,084. I mean, anything's possible, but I'm just looking at it odds wise. Now, the reason why I think that's the lower odds scenario, I did predict that we were going to get some sideways price action because of everything that we just mentioned. But at the same time, right, we have the balance is mature enough, right, where if we did get a bounce breakout pattern, it would be a bigger picture pattern breakout, which what I was thinking was happening when I had this much information. Okay, when I had this much information, I thought, okay, maybe we could bounce a little bit up here, then break above it by the end of the week, and then hold above it, kind of a thing. Now, we balanced, and then we kind of broke below this, right? So it's not what we wanted to get this sort of maybe better structure, which would be basically at this zone or even above it. We wanted to retest this. So now the larger time frame pattern is now potentially neutral, right? Because I'm not sure if this is a balance breakout, bigger picture pattern yet. It could just be another pattern that's forming if we do fail here, which is just a bigger balance, which is what it is right now, right? Because of this last week, right? We have a short-term breakdown, right? We broke these lows, which I went long today and got stopped out because that's the system. And when it fails, you get out. Now, what's happening is that even though the structure broke, there is this potential zero line reject, but that's just one thing. I have to take that in the context of the fact that we are rotating potentially off a major resistance zone now, right? Where we could, be going much steeper into this because of this bigger picture pattern fail, right? You have to be nimble in your thinking, right? If I say, hey, this is a potential bigger picture pattern, and then it fails, well, then it's a false breakout pattern, and now we have to reassess. Now, it's not so much that I thought that just because this broke down sharply, right? This has been a trend. All trends end in a balance, or they can end in a climax, which would be a reversal here. But at the very least, I did draw a chart, which I'll show you on the weekly, where it said, hey, we are going to possibly, going sideways. Now, we could get a steeper retracement, which would take us a little deeper in summer. We can go back and test this high volume node. If this intermediate term bounce breakdown is a continuation pattern, right? Let's go on the weekly and see what that might look like. That might give us a better view. So we'll get out of these smaller time frames because it might turn around right here, right? So I had as the first scenario that we would go up here and then balance into this fractal, right? And technically, this is a little bit aggressive, but it would be basically an IBB. You'd be buying the breakout as it broke out into this balance with the stop here. But in hindsight, right, it's been multiple legs down. It's more extended, but clearly not a typical trend down day. But as soon as at 7:10, we just pretty much tanked the whole day. We did get a strong move here, which is I had a winner on that one, right? And then when it came back down in here, the system said, okay, well, this is a 15, not a great one, but it's a 15-minute double bottom. Now, in hindsight, everyone's a genius after the move happens, right? Because it's hindsight bias. But this was technically a 15-minute double bottom. What was my gut instinct at the time? Well, I was like, well, anything could happen. I want to take a small loss here if it does, but my mind prep was that if this does break, then my idea is invalidated, and this thing could, potentially take off. That's why I have a gap here. Right now, you might say, okay, isn't this reversing here? Is this extend? Yeah, I mean, anything could happen. Doesn't have to be a trend down day. This could be sort of a day that goes back up towards this median VWAP. I just have to be okay with missing this because I'm doing this coaching call now, and I already had a loss here, a winner here, but the loss was bigger than the winner, so this was a small losing day. And this was also a day where I took some losses because even though this was a winner here, I kind of broke a rule and got a little. The zone was different, but I got in a little higher, right? I was like fading. There was a zone up here, right? I mean, you could really beat yourself up, or you might have a troll to try to beat yourself up, and really, and you just go back and say, what were you doing? Well, this is what I was fading. I knew it wasn't great because if you look on the hourly, it's not great. But if you go on the higher time frames, we're essentially fading against a move down off a stronger zone, right? That's the risk. Now, with this one, if I had the gumption to take it, there's a nice risk reward. If we get the reversal, it's closer towards this trend down line, and it could be a false breakdown out of this idea that I had that if it broke here, we could go down here. Remember, if these patterns reverse, technically I should jump in right now, but I am coaching. Do I let this go? I'll let it go. I'll let it go. That's the hardest part. Is that there is sometimes a move that you would need to take during this hour. Now, the other thing that wasn't really setting up Bitcoin for a great trade today was the position of Ethereum, which was a factor against it, which is why I almost was like, maybe I should just sideline, because my first analysis on the day was, okay, this is gearing up to be a balance, right? We want it to be a breakout and have that similar pattern to Bitcoin, but until it's broken, it's resistance, right? And this is technically a triple top. We had this HVN here, and it just lacked, it's been lacking that momentum to get out. So the scenario that I gave today is that, as this pulls back, if it closed even much greener, it was actually in the green when I said this. I said, if it closes exactly like it is right now, which was in the green, but it's still snapped back with this beginning of this tail, that's going to be a false breakout pattern. And those have good odds to get like moves down at the very least. And we're already starting to see signs of that, which, is not great. What is now potentially happening is that instead of this being a bounce breakout pattern, we just got a false breakout, which pushes us back into bounce, which can take us down to the bottom of this and just extend the balance another week or so, whatever. This could just be the reverse. Now we have to monitor how this correlates with Bitcoin because not that I want to put that synchronicity as, oh my God, that's the ultimate edge of the system. It's not. It's just one of like a lot of things we look at. But just reminding yourself that anytime you are extended and you are going counter directional to an extended leg count, you are prone to steeper pullbacks. And that was the small voice in my head that said, hey, maybe, this is a day where you should take off. But at the same time, right, when you're factoring in a day time frame system, you have to factor in like, okay, these small losses are part of this system. It's actually good to take them because I always compare my performance to my portfolio to my shorter term trades, my swing trades, right? I just had a really big win in the swing trade. And then I've also been trading on the ES and Bitcoin. But the last 2 days were two loser days. But the same idea. It's like I'm 100% following my system aside from a small error I made yesterday, which isn't that big of a deal where I took it at the beginning of the zone. So when you're still taking losses and you're following your rules, that's actually a good thing. But so one of the tricks I say to myself and say it is a good thing, I was like, I compare the drawdown that I took the last 2 days compared to let's say a drawdown you might have in a buy and hold, let's say a gold hold or some physical I'm holding. And it's like, wow, you allow way more risk on the other side than you would even following your anti-martingale rules on this side. So it's a completely psychological thing that's happening, not necessarily an error in your system. So that's one thing I just wanted to point out is that it's like the quote from the professional poker player Daisy Duke, which is like, you might need to push in on all pocket queens and go all in. You know that you might not win that hand, but you know that mathematically you're going to win enough of the time. But you have to take that, you have the grit to do it, So that's the idea. But now zooming out, let's go to this weekly chart here. Okay. So we got the prediction from the higher time frame. Where if you were an investor, you could pretty much just trade this chart where you would load into, and a day trader, any time frame, you want to be with the bigger time frames. But for these higher time frame guys, you want to do weekly and monthly. You would have faded the double bottom, and you would have had the added edge of this chart, which has been pretty historically accurate. It can give you some information about the future, right? Which is the idea that if I take this double bottom around this time cycle, these nodes don't say, "Oh my God, it goes up, goes down." They're just actually inflection points. So you have to do other kinds of TA, right? So my gut was that something happening here. It's not just going to go back and forth. It's going to be significant, and odds were that because the time frames were up, because we were basically retesting this giant bounce breakout spot, and we had this huge divergence here, among other reasons. The price pattern, right? The 30-week time cycle, which is more in the favor lately of this trend cycle we're still in. And I drew the arrows for it that we were going to get at least up to here, which we did. Now it's when I took off on that big position on SWE, which was a 33% profit. And because I'm also using this chart as well. Now I pretty much was using this chart to go into some of these alts because they kind of, obviously, until they really start to diverge, we need Bitcoin to move here. But the idea is that once we got up here, because of this bigger picture pattern, which is potential for, this inverse head and shoulder, this V recovery, and the fact that we've been in this trend, there's good odds that we're going to get a sideways tradable reaction, but not so much that we could potentially get this level of retracement because of the way I got there by describing those two things. So the idea is that at least we would go sideways to this level is the first scenario. Now, if I'm wrong, right, we go sideways, whatever, a couple more weeks, and we start to break down, then I start to imagine beauty principle that's going to look like this. So I clone this, and that's the next one where if I'm not going short, you don't have to go short, right? Where I just sideline. Where when I talk to my stats coach, he's like, be careful. He's like, you got that live channel, and you have this, idea that like you have to provide content or whatever because the people, but it's like sometimes the content is just not to trade, and I might just stick to fundamentals that day or whatever. Because really reducing the amount of trade frequency is really the key to this, which I've been getting a lot better at. Notice even though I'm a day trader and swing trader, I take a lot less trades. I'm not taking a huge amount of trades. I had a huge periodic review, and one of my stats coaches he's like, you do know that one day you went unconscious and you took 17 trades in a row. I was like, what the heck? I was like, I didn't post that in the chat. It's like, yeah, it's one of the only days you diverged. I don't even know what was happening. It was a stress. I might have been fighting with my girlfriend at the time. I don't even remember. You just got to be careful because moods, energy, people around you, everything that can be happening, you can go unconscious. And then, but what sticks it back is like always when you calm down from that mistake, go back and say, well, what did the system really tell me to do? Anytime there's usually a mistake, you can go back and say, well, the system pretty much had it down. Now, you have to be careful. Like the last 2 days, I have to kind of raise my spirits because I don't like to lose ever, but I have to take these small little losses. But the idea is that, okay, well, if the sweet trade was 33% profit and these last one were like a 0.5% loss, 0.2%, everything was less than one, right? And then I had that one small winner, which I was so pissed that it came back down again. I said, oh, I should have had an alarm because I would have woke up at 1 a.m. or 12:30 and just did it again. But guys, I have to focus on my health a little bit. Like Kobe, he's gained so much weight because he pretty much does the same thing I just described. You know what I mean? His doctor's like, you're gonna die. You can't. Remember, he's always like, oh, I work 20 hours a day. I'm like, yeah, because I'm not doing the alarm thing too. But then you miss out on profits. Like that would have been a huge win for me. Would have made up all from the losses yesterday. And the system said to take it because I said, hey guys, if you're up and you're take the bull bear zone, like that's part of the rules in the rule list. And it has a good edge, right? It just didn't work today, right? It worked the other day, it worked last night. And but so the system, but the small losses are part of the system. So it's like if it's already factored into your system, you shouldn't feel bad about it. But when you do, because you guys are traders here, I know some of you guys are going pro, there is pros. What you have to do is like work on the skill of feeling good. So it's like I'm out making that fire in that garden so I can put ash in between, exercising a lot more, just being more routine about it, and also anticipating that these are going to come, and then using the skill set. I'm just comparing like, okay, well, the sweet trade was 33% and these were small losses. I'm still way up. Just go back in time and zoom out or do a highlight reel because even though there's going to be small losses to try this, you're still taking a way less of a drawdown than if you buy and held. And at the same time, you still have to have the guts and the grit to take to the next positive expectancy trade if you're up. If you're not up, then you didn't. Like one of the things I could have done is I could have put in what did I could I guess what I could have done because I was already half off, I could have put another order in with the other half that was there. You know what I mean? But if you didn't take half off, you have to just set an alarm. But it's like, that's why Corby was staying up 20 hours a day. I just can't do it. If I'm going to bed, I'm going to bed. But I'm still going to just constantly scan for the next trade. So I think if this holds here, right, we could get that kind of V recovery and then have the potential to rest because we can't just go straight line up. We went so straight line up. But anytime we go straight line up, eventually we go sideways, straight line up sideways, straight line up sideways. But the idea is that at least this is in alignment with this time cycle. Now, let's say we are going sideways and we're going to use this as the next vehicle. What could this represent, right? Well, there's different scenarios. Like, how could we use this? This represents, and remember, just because these have worked really uncanny in the past, like for example, right here, this was at a major resistance zone, right? And this time cycle said, this is going to be a huge inflection point where something really awesome is going to happen. And, it happened to be a giant bounce breakout pattern and things got really bullish after that. What's awesome about bounce breakout patterns is even if you don't want to trade the momentum of this, the next time it visits the bounce breakout pattern, and it could be on any time frame, but this is a weekly one, so it's super important. It's one of the highest expectancy trades ever. Let's just say you were super disciplined, higher time frame trader. You don't even want to trade my 15-minute turning points because they are a little stressful to trade. Like my adrenaline does go up when you do take those. And you have the patience to just sit through this all and you just had a giant resting, or like just imagine it. Like, I don't care if it breaks out here. If it comes down here, I'm buying. You put a resting order there and it hit it. It's like, man, you got such a good risk reward out of that. And it's just being patient. And the problem it's simple to do. It's sometimes when you know what to do with these things and you can see these decodes, they're simple to see and talk about, but the execution of that, there might be so many things happening at that point. You might be sleeping, your kid might be up, maybe you got psyched out about it, but you could see how like you always have to fade a major zone. It's just part of the rules. That is a broken resistance now acting as support on a super time frame. That's automatic. And the thing about this is that we launched up way stronger than I thought it was, guys. Like I didn't anticipate that we were gonna because this is not that big of a bounce. That's what kind of scared me about how quickly this went up. Like everyone was happy about how quickly that went up, but I don't necessarily like quick trends on weeklies. I want to see like I thought we were gonna go up and then do something like this for a couple weeks and then get a stronger pop into this. So we got, hang on a sec. We got the one in the short term that feels good or the intermediate term, but now we're going to get that. But notice that last time we did this, a couple things, right? One is that this went in a straight line up, right? And then it retested itself in the context of this balance that already moved 100% of its range. So that was already due. And because we were in this trend phase, right, we know that all trends end in balances. So it can't just go. Think about that. Even if you have a higher time frame conviction, like these guys, hey, be careful. Like I'm like, I got to be careful sending some of the sensationalist news titles of some famous guy saying Bitcoin's going to 5 million in whatever year or 5 years. It's like there's no whatever whoever's doing that. It's impossible to know the future, but it is possible to just see these basic things that we can do to remove risk. Like people, I would be happy right now that we paused and got all out of sweet. And like the 80 cents DCA guys for the portfolio are holding it, but for the position trade guys, that made sense. So you could see how when we were up here, it made sense that we were going to get a bigger pullback because this was already exhausted. But the way this got up here is eventually bullish, but the fact that this went straight line gives me pause that maybe this, I don't want this scenario to have, maybe it's something like this more. Let's get rid of this, where this thing's now going to, I would hate it to be a very extended, boring summer, but it's possible. We could get if we just beauty principle this out, and this would actually be better for even though it would suck in the short term for us this summer. this would be better. The bullish scenario would still be on, and technically, it would actually be more bullish because if you think about it, right, the longer you go sideways, the more potential energy and rest you have, the greater kinetic energy you can launch from it. We've had basically it's overbought in the intermediate term. This thing is a small balance, and if we cloned it, we didn't get that thing that I wanted, which was oops. Just imagine that if we went up here a little bit, we went sideways for a while. We didn't get that. We got something where now we could be prone to a steeper pullback, but we have to see how this weekly close. Like for example, it's the week hasn't ended yet, but remember when we got up here, we had this gave us a hint. The fact that we were getting really steep pullbacks, and even though on the daily I said, hey, now that on this leg count we are prone to steeper pullbacks, that is true relative to the other leg counts on the daily. But now I'm just comparing it to the beauty of this past shoulder. If we do get something similar to this shoulder, we'll have an inverse head and shoulder patterns, which then will give us stronger potential energy in alignment. Practically, if we just clone this out a little bit, kind of cheating a little bit here, but let's just say we get a longer bounce with this, where we could get 100% of a range breakthrough, where it would take us up to this area, which is pretty much my highs of this cycle kind of a thing, where before we get a big potential bear, which is pretty reasonable. It's like 132. Probably will go a little higher to 104. I hope it goes higher, but I just don't want to overpromise on myself on these things. If there's a low risk entry, I'll get in again. But this pullback was expected, so I had to remind myself that maybe being the first guys going long underneath this, even though there was lower time frame stuff, isn't really smart. And it probably, unfortunately for everybody in the room, it should have been a time where we should have flipped odds and shorted into this zone, which it is psychologically hard for me to give shorts because I'm such a huddler. And I know a lot of guys are just huddlers or position traders and they don't short. So I always feel like, are people pissed that I'm short? There's always that thing, but it's like, there's also just like, I'm also huddling. And, you know, with the ES, it's easier for me to short because I have that added internal thing. But technically, guys, like there really is no difference. We're up here into the zone. You could actually now start the short. That's what that neutral. When I said the larger time frame was bullish when we had that overshoot here and we popped up, that means we were only going long. And while there was smaller time frame stuff, wouldn't you have only wanted to go long with runners here? That was a really good call. That's why that multiple time frame alignment analysis is really good with the daily call stuff because it really can get you on the right side of the market. At the same time, when it does go from bullish to now neutral, I'm not saying it's bearish yet, but it is neutral where I'm open to that. Where now we can't short. This is when this would have been a nice short. I don't know what I was doing that day or if I didn't want to give it because they come in the night, but that would have been, just so everyone knows, like if I'm shorting, people have asked this, not in this room, but in that show that I was invited on or whatever that group is. They're like, well, how do you? They're like, I'm not actually selling my spot, so don't worry about that. It's just basically I'm doing this basically fake paper thing where I take a contract with the exchange, and then you sell it called a short. It's the same exact thing, really, on the bot. It just flips the order. That's it. I don't. It really doesn't even. I don't even have to differentiate it, which is pretty good. So if anyone wants me help, I can help you set up that bot. Be really convenient. If you have the exchange that it would work for, it depends. So just thinking in scenarios, it's like we got to be cautious and see how this closes. Technically, if you were a long only trader, you would be at the very least you wouldn't want to be going into this now that we had this bounce breakdown. You know, all things being equal, somebody might snap this up and then it closes back up into balance, and then okay, well the odds are different. Then I'll change my bias. But right now, if this closes below here heavy, right? This is where we could have that steeper pullback, and then we have to back off. What you'd want to do if you're a long only trader is wait for a doji day, which see how I can make that look for you guys. Essentially, just imagine a day that would look like this little guy. Like I just had tight little cross, little pause day here with little momentum. Then we would, try to get in on a turning point. We'll keep in mind we might get something really choppy let's just clone this. I had this clone here for a while. Or let's actually just make it bigger because we know the principle we're going to get a steeper pullback. We just have to be careful now because we are multiple. This is not the second leg count or the first leg count. This is the fourth leg count into it. Now, 5 or 6 is when I'm really going to be bearish on this. But remember, leg count is just one factor. The larger time frame bias is factoring in a lot of different things. So for sure, leg count on 4 legs up, you're going to be sideways or sideways, even down. You're thinking we're going to get a steeper pullback. This is when you're going to be open to it. But it doesn't mean that longs are completely off the table because of, like I said, the way price got there. So that's just that contextual thing where you add up the odds, but eventually, like, when would longs be off the table? If we get a huge bounce breakdown pattern from here where it's like, okay, now we're on some momentum, and now it might be a situation where it needs to actually go back and touch this high volume node. So I know it seems like, well, which scenario is going to happen? It's like, well, there's no answer. There is no 100% certainty here. Like, for example, my confidence in the system's odds got higher when I gave the signal to buy way ahead of time on this triple bottom that I imagined would happen, because I said you need to overshoot to get a break of this bearish downtrend line, which we did. And once we got that, that confirmed the neutral bias, which, eventually we were all shorting here, right? We were basically, not necessarily that we were only shorting, because when we got here support, but the bias was still, once we got up to this trend line, the bears took over. And this was like months and months. So technically, that's when the bigger picture bias was down. But anytime we got down to this level, right? I remember before I said, remember how this balance is bigger than this balance breakdown? That's when you do the multiple time frame analysis, and that's when it would reverse. But it took a mature balance and this overshoot to really get the momentum out of that. And it was a crazy pattern. But now that I'm up here, I'm less certain as to what's going to happen. Right? I can't say I'm 100% convinced that now that we are going to go all the way down to 75,000 again, and this is just going to be an extended balance. Simply because the way price got there, and I think this would form another shoulder, and then we would go. So I think this high volume node is going to be, I think this 97,099 is going to be key support. And the reason why I'm talking about this, and I wasn't necessarily talking about it the other day when I was talking about a bigger picture bounce breakdown, is because it's like, oh, Matt's always changed his mind. I'm like, yeah, I have to, because I have new information now. I'm okay with admitting it was a wrong idea. But it wasn't a bad idea when we had this much information. We were actually technically in a bounce breakout pattern, and this was blue sky, and now it's actually resistance because we did get the confirmed breakdown. When it came up here and retested, you now had that double top. That would obviously, in hindsight, been a great short, right? Because we were at this major resistance zone. I think I even said in the channel, like, this is a major resistance zone. So an automatic long is at a major support. So wouldn't an automatic short be in a major resistance zone? I'm not saying you had to do this one on blue sky before we knew the reverse, but on the retest, yeah. But even though I'm super good at getting to that, I didn't take that short. I just know I just wanted to post it in the room for everyone else, that so they could see the rule, because like I said, the system is really awesome that we put together, but there's also, like, do you have the balls to put it in that night? Maybe you're just not feeling it. But you can see it's just, more than not, if you fade a major zone, you get a huge move down. Major resistance, big move down. Now, I just don't think it's going to be all the way down here. But now that we did break this, it does leave open this possibility, right? That we are going to get, eventually down to this high volume node. But we have to see how today closes, like I said, because I right now we're in this pattern where if we close below here, we are in this short-term breakdown pattern, which has the odds now to eventually take us at least down to this level, if not down to this node, because this now could be a momentum break. But if we close with a slight tail up, it increases the odds now that this is actually a zero line reject. So I know it sounds wishy-washy, but I've actually been trained to actually think in scenarios and if-then statements and be okay with it. So it's a really counterintuitive system to just think in these probabilities and then have this scale that's because like the human being wants certainty. Like I want to know these things. And it's flat out okay to be like, okay, I'm not as good at figuring out the context up near this potential breakout spot or not because I'm not the greatest confident futures trader. I just don't want to short whatever reason. I could just not trade. Whereas here, this is when I was even drawing this out ahead of time. Let's get aggressive, super double bottom, bigger sideways zone so the time frame get aligned up. We're going with it. That's great. It's on spot. Here, not trading is trading. We could just back off because I said to myself, well, technically, the swing trade on SWE, a couple of day trades here, the short on the ES. I could have just backed off after that swing trade, but it's like, remember, just keep zooming out and you will see basically patterns within patterns where you're like, okay, well, here's a series of winners. We went up, slight drawdown, went down. But if you zoom in only on the drawdown, you get psyched out. So let's just do a broad market review now that we did some psychology. Or hopefully by me sharing my psychology, it helps you guys with yours. Okay. So yeah, and I mean, also overall, even though we've been in some pretty bullish patterns, just short term and intraday, short term is like the last couple of days, 4 days. We're not looking super great. We failed back. Keep in mind, tomorrow's Friday. Friday, there is this. I don't want to get too focused on it, but because of what's happening today, there is this Give Back Friday potential where it's just generally people are on vacation, taking it earlier. If it was a bad week, they might, if we close low on these are kind of engulfing everything. So it just weakens everything, right? So yeah, not the frenzy that we wanted, but we need some kind of crazy God candle all this to really set the tone for the alts. The best I can do with the altcoin strategy for the buy and hold, like I've been doing for you guys, is DCing at uh, good levels on coins that have really good fundamentals, where there are a lot of things in partnerships and even companies that are making money with the right, like this coin theta here, right? People have been sleeping on it, but I mean, think about the partnerships and what the potential is, and that it was at $16 last bull run without all the progress that it's made, and now it's at 83 cents. Now, this is not something I would ever recommend anyone actually really get into for like a day trade, right? If you wanted to put a large amount and then have like a 0.5% to a 1.5 to 2% stop, it's so volatile that it's just like you'll get stopped out before it even works out. But what I recommend you can do is just then flip back to martingale, where it's like, okay, I'm going to control my risk with a position size that's small enough that I can afford to lose. So, you just DCA in at these levels every month, every week, and you build your position around whatever. And, you have targets that are reasonable. I mean, even this was November into December last Christmas, and it got up to $3.33. Even if you don't have the belief that it'll get to the last bull run, you might have the belief that it'll get to what it got December because the partnerships in uh, such and such has increased. And Mitch Liu, who's not really known, his main criticism is that he does no public marketing, but his main uh, what people champion him for is the fact that he just does these amazing big partnerships like Samsung, Sony. I mean, you can go on their website and look at them all. Google. Now they got these sports things going. They got all these universities. If they do this decentralized video thing that I just posted, I mean, that was what they originally sold me on when I went in crazy on this. And fair enough, like I am biased. I am holding. I have a big position in this and I'm rooting for it. But, so how does the system work on even a DCA? Well, it's like you can see here, well, we use bigger picture patterns, and here was an inverse head and shoulders. I know some people don't like them, but it's like, well, look, DCA'd on this day when I told you to go in, you were up really nicely. And even if you didn't want to hold it to that level, now you took a quad exit and you have half off with your stop here or whatever. And who cares what happens? It might work out. We might go higher, might not. in the short term, but you don't care. So that's what I wouldn't care though if you're like, hey, I only put in like a small amount, like let's say you're DCAing like a 500 a week or something, and now it's like, yeah, keep building a position on this, and you can even start staking T fuel because he doesn't do a lot of marketing, but he recently said they're going to do this some huge announcement. I think it might be a big American exchange because they're not on a lot of American exchanges, and that's one of the main criticisms that Mitchell gets. It's like, well, now he just said, hey, he's like theta and T fuel are going to be at their all time highs, sooner than you think. Like I don't know what the exact phrasing was. You can go to the channel. Like this summer is relatively soon because of this announcement, and I don't think it's going to be Coinbase. I think it's going to be crypto.com, whatever. But that would really help it out because it doesn't really get that exposure. But what coins have we recommended that already have launched pretty well and are people in profits is sweet. That's really kind of been it's not at its all-time lows. In fact, it's one of our best performers. And you can see why. It's pretty much a volatile Bitcoin. It's held up very well. And recently there's been this hack on a related coin. I called it the beta coin of Sui. You can see how they are related in terms of their if one gets hacked, the other one gets the bad news. It's Cetus. That's that exchange coin that was using the Sui network, but it is not Sui Cetus. But even this is recovered. And once again, if you still wanted to buy a coin that you thought was still viable despite that, which a lot of coins have been hacked and they've recovered, you can just use the TA. Look, we had a bullish divergence with the CCI, which I gave this one in real time. So you could have DCA'd into that. My position is already built. I haven't sold, so fair warning. Sweet, like I said, I got out of that one swing trade, but still holding the portfolio. And if it gets down to a decent level, I might go in again on a pretty big size and position trade that again while still holding the larger position. So let's see. Dot mentioned for an ETF, it's still so these coins look so ugly um, from a chart perspective, but it takes one crazy move, they take off. So Huntington's been having some relative strength. He had a big day yesterday, but quickly getting some. Just as we're wrapping up here, let's just take a look at Bitcoin dominance. Right. So the alt season scenario one at major resistance at this launching point down, which is also the golden mean at the 61.8%. It did act on first test a pretty strong resistance where Bitcoin took a kind of got a little weak, and then we had. You can go back and take a look at this. This is December, relatively speaking, even though they all went up, Bitcoin dominance was going down. So how did that affect the alts? The alts were on fire. Now, I was hoping all right, this was it, and we get that huge move down, but we didn't, right? We one try, right? And then we failed. We got above it. On the retest, now this broken resistance is now acting as support. Now, I didn't just draw this after this hit. This was drawn way ahead of time. These principles just work. So this was, you say, well, isn't this broken resistance acting as support here? Like, well, no, we didn't really break out here. In fact, we had a false breakout, and then it became this question mark, really. And technically speaking, once you see a selling tail, it doesn't give one a lot of confidence, especially when it's at resistance, that we're going to get a breakout, and but we did, you know what I mean? It just doesn't. So if you missed it, it is what it is. But when is it a good reentry? Here, after it comes back down. So if you missed this, fine. I mean, you could have thought we could have pulled back here because of it. But on this, once it's broken and spends time away from it, yeah, now it has really high odds to move. That's just a principle I want to show, even though we're using this for Bitcoin dominance, because now that this did happen, this V, we are now going to get, which is ideally better for alt season, this 73.23, 73.8% resistance zone, which would be, the major higher odds scenario that we get a move. If we even get there, because we have to still break this 100% balance here. We might get something close enough here, right? overshoot. So that is where we are. Um, we're at this question mark area where we are going to be going neutral now with our bias to sideways, where now you're going to see more bearish days. The both, even though there's going to be some sideways action, you can see on the daily chart for Bitcoin that if we look at the last, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like the last week, the intermediate time frame, even though the longs have been active, right, through Saturday, there was that double bottom on Sunday and then rode up, right? You can see just how quickly the bears, right, just in terms of this time frame, seem to have a slight neutral bearish edge. And you'd expect, and I just remind myself, Matt, don't get chopped up. Sometimes I'm riding and then I'm like, hey, this is when I should go short. But I'm like hoping for the pullback and you start to get just blasted, right? So just either go short or back off. That's what I was even saying. I just got to remind myself to execute on it as well. Because, in hindsight, it would have been totally fair to say, hey, I'm at this major resistance zone. I'm just going to sideline if I'm long biased guy. That's totally fine too. So yeah, we got to take this one day at a time now to see how we react here at this resistance zone. If we can, are we going to get a pause day and this going to continue sideways? And then there might be some more neutrality, or, is this going to close a little bit lower and then we get a little bit of a bounce breakdown and now we have a steeper retracement, which is also now more likely now because we just broke below the major resistance zone, whereas the day before it actually was shaping up to be a balanced breakdown. We are now below the previous two all-time highs, right? That's not what we wanted to see. But it is what it is for now. We got to take it one day at a time. And it's a Thursday, so I will be in the room Friday, and you know where to find me, guys. So thanks for coming out. And unless anyone has any questions, I'll open the floor for a sec. But if not, hey, totally fine. You guys know where to find me. You could ask questions in the room, and I'm going to keep on keeping on. Take care, guys.